Sound good.
Sound
All
good.
right. Hit the button and going live and oh, you're live. Boom. All right, so now we're live. Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello, hello.
On the tubes. Check out Nick's shirt.
We built this city.
We haven't
Don't
started
sing that too
recording
long
yet,
because
right?
we'll get demonetized again. No, we have. I mean, we are recording, but we're not on the show.
Oh, did have we gotten demonetized for like?
We did because Nick put on
That's my
Careless
fault.
Whisper during the break because Emma and Trigby, who was the guest, both went to the bathroom and it was just Nick sitting there by himself.
Is this like just some bot that's like scanning?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Like that's like super ridiculous though. That's like.
and it was only like
It was like
Was it
25
30s?
seconds.
yeah.
Oh my
I think
God.
15 is the magic number, but I'm not sure.
Is that what it is? I was thinking 30,
so.
so I tried to stay under that.
Didn't matter because we don't make any money on the stream anyways. But they're like, you've been demonetized. I was like, damn you, Nick. Careless Whisper. That was the song, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
Oh,
It
it's
was
Careless
hilarious.
It's my
Music.
go-to.
It was very careless. Okay, sent that off. Tweet this off.
I'm just contemplating all the DRM and whatever the hell else. Like
Yeah, it's
I
pretty
just it's ridiculous. It's like chill out, people. Everything was invented before you were even born. So we're just like reinventing shit, you know?
What year did Careless Whisper come out? 80.
Yeah,
Seven?
but like really, like I mean, we can deconstruct Careless Whisper and come up with like 700 influences that like made
Right.
Careless Whisper, right?
Everything's
like,
a remix, right?
Everything is a remix. Like borrow, steal. Nothing
Came out
is
in
original
1984.
except for nature. Nature is like the
94?
only original thing.
84.
Okay, 84 sounds more correct than 94. Okay, good to go. I'm going to stop my video.
You good? All right.
Hop off. Have fun, y'all. Don't forget
Oh,
to
you're
hide
not
non-video
joining?
participants so you don't have to stare at my mug.
Yep.
No, I'm not
Jared's
going to
just
join.
hosting. He's going to check out, go have a beer or whatever.
I
It's
just
after
don't-
lunch your time, right?
It is lunchtime. I'll probably go get my food, bring it back up here, and listen to you guys while I eat. It's probably my move I'm gonna do. Yeah, ML. I just don't have a work environment, so I can't really say much. I'll just be over here, just like I don't know what I would do. Moan.
You can stick it to the man. You can tell us how you stuck it to the man. You can be like the alt view.
Sir, you are the man. Yeah. No, I'll just let you guys. I don't need to steal airtime. Ready for that intro music, K-Ball?
Well, let me check Nick and Emil. Are y'all feeling ready? Okay,
Yeah.
let's do it.
All right, here we go.
Hello, JS Party people, and welcome to another week's fabulous JS Party, where we have a party every week talking about JavaScript and the web. I am K-Ball. I will be your MC this week, and I'm joined by two amazing panelists. First off, Amel, long time no chat. How you doing?
I'm alive, everybody. I'm alive. Yes, I am. I miss being on the show so much. Life has just been super busy. Maybe we'll talk about that today. But happy to be back. Thank you for the warm welcome, K-Ball.
We are excited to have you. And then the one, the only, Nick Nisi.
Hoi, hoi. How's it going?
Going well. Glad that Mr. Burns is here with us, and we will see if there's any. Will this week have stories from Disney movies? Will it have song clips? Who knows? You never know with Nick. But today's discussion, we're going to be talking about work environments and particularly what makes for a really good environment for developers. And this was initially sparked as an idea because there was a Honeypot article, which as of this morning is not loading. So we'll see if they ever get that back up. But they had a developer happiness index where they're like, okay, where are developers the most happy? What are they doing? And it got me wondering, like, we've all been in very different work environments over our careers. What are the things that make for really good or really bad work environments?
Oh my God, is this like a trap?
It's the ping pong tables, right? Like that's what makes or breaks it.
Honestly, there's like so many factors that go into like making a workplace healthy, that like are completely outside of the sphere of tech, right? So tech is like a circle in the larger sphere, right? There's certain things that are unique to tech that I think can either exacerbate your level of unhappiness or at minimum keep your anxiety at bay, right? Because it's a nice place to work. But I'd say tech is like a really stressful industry for lots of reasons. Constant change. Like we haven't developed a lot of good social norms around best practices, and like it's not like we're doctors, where doctors have been doctors for like centuries. People have been web developers for a relatively short amount of time, and I think we're very much a young industry, and we're still kind of reeling from that youngness, as everybody's like trying to figure out how to do something the best way, and then turns out like 3 months later you find out the hard way, like not the best way. So I don't know. I'm not really answering your question very well, because I think if I start answering it, I won't stop. So I want to leave. I want to like hear from Nick, and then we can circle back a little more on that.
Well, for me, it's more of a foosball table. That's the big key, not ping pong so much. But no, I think kind of to your point, Samel, like there's a lot of stereotypes that we have to overcome too. The typical quote unquote typical developer is a loner who sits alone in a dark basement and works alone. And that's really not always the case, as I sit here alone in my dark basement. But there's a lot of that. And like, we want to, there is a huge social aspect to it, but we don't always prioritize that. And it's not really, I don't know, quote unquote marketed that way.
So that's an interesting thing to dig into, the social aspect, because on the one hand, I think social connection and being connected to your coworkers is really valuable. And we pick where we work at least partially because we like the people there. On the other hand, the idea of, we're like family here and all these other things has been used to do all sorts of toxic types of work environments. So kind of where do you all fall on that?
I would say that really, like, you kind of hit the nail on I would say something that's very common in tech. Like you see the unlimited vacations, unlimited PTO, but like nobody takes it, and like companies, FANG companies popularizing like free food and like laundry, and like, why don't you just live here? Like, let's just like maximize your day, and so you're productive to the nth degree and can be maximally efficient at work, so you don't have to think about anything else. So, we've kind of applied so much of that culture of like over optimizing, we've kind of taken that to like another level in our industry, where we're like, hey, let's help people optimize their lives so they can do more work. I don't think we need to do that. I think like, in fact, like we should be more inefficient, and like, people, like I'm into like going to the grocery and like feeling my vegetables and stuff. Like I know people aren't, that doesn't have to be a universal thing, but I just mean that like I'm into giving myself some slack, and I don't feel the need to optimize everything. And even though it's like an internal bias that I have as an engineer, so it's something I'm constantly checking myself on. So I think boundaries at work are super important. And for me, like the best way I've managed to avoid that, or I say have good boundaries at work, is really I intentionally kind of pick companies and teams that are diverse, in the sense that like folks that, I don't like working at places that have monocultures. So, if everybody's like in their 20s, has no kids, isn't married or whatever, that's a little bit of a monoculture, and it's going to skew towards a certain, I'd say, cult. What is cult the right word? What's the right word? I don't know.
It's a good word.
Yeah. So that's, so I think for me, a balance and, having diversity of lifestyle at work really helps kind of, I think, combat that, because, people have lives, and, monocultures are bad. So.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely seen my priorities change, as I've become older and had kids. I used to want to code all the time or go out. I remember specifically, like when I was younger, going out to, get drinks or dinner with coworkers, and we'd like be talking about work, and we'd be making like all these decisions about like things we were going to do, or like ways to architect things. And then coming back the next day, and like anybody who wasn't there just kind of felt out of the club a little bit. And now, like, 5 o'clock comes around, and my focus is on my kids until they go to bed, and then usually I just want to go to bed after that. So there's not a coding doesn't take a priority, or my job doesn't take a priority after a specific time. Like, there's definitely more important things, and it's been relatively easy, I'd say, to transition to that, but I know that it can be more difficult for sure.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to think about, and especially in this world where now there's a lot more remote work and people are in different time zones and other things. Like, if the expectation is you're hanging out after hours at the bar or whatever, like that doesn't work so well, not only with parents, but if you have folks who are in different locations, like.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like, work is work. And I think if work is just work and not like anything beyond the 8 hours or whatever you're supposed to dedicate to it 5 days a week, I think that's a good start, right? I think like when work starts to kind of blur that 8-hour boundary, or I personally think even 8 hours is unhealthy. Like, I would love to be at a place where I have a 32-hour work week or a 30-hour work week. I think I'm more productive that way, actually. I'd like to kind of compress my time, but I don't live in France, so oh well, I think that they have like official 34-hour work week in France or something. Anyways, so for me, I'm like, when life starts, like, I'd say when work kind of starts to kind of spill over into the other parts of my life, that's where like I get stressed or burnt out, and I'm fairly good at putting myself in that cycle, like personally. Maybe this is TMI for people, but I'm a little bit of an overachiever, and I really like working hard, pushing myself professionally, taking on more responsibilities, et cetera, like that constantly leads to, I would say, needing to kind of like force myself to have some downtime and like reestablish boundaries. But I'm constantly fighting that for myself. Like, I'm constantly fighting my boundaries with work, and it's not often because of my boss or my team. It's like self-inflicted, so that's something else to, like, sometimes you are your own like worst enemy in that regard. So
that raises a really interesting question, right? Because I think a lot of folks, both in this and in other kind of knowledge intensive industries, fit in this sort of like anxious overachiever model, where people are like feeling, and this is where a lot of like imposter syndrome and other things start to come in, of you feel like I'm never good enough. And so I work really, really hard and push myself to be better and to get there. But that leads to this blending of boundaries, and we're working too much and whatever. I had one of my reports be like, oh yeah, I felt like we were behind on this, so I was going to work this weekend. And I was like, dude, like, it's okay. If you're behind, that's not your fault. That's actually the part of the system. So what I'd love to dig into here is, what are the aspects of the work environment? What are the systemic factors that lead to these boundaries getting blurred or not? Because like, most of us in this industry push ourselves. We're here because we we're good at something and we pushed and we spent a lot of time learning. There's a lot of stuff you have to learn to do this. So we're all of the character types that is going to lead to poor boundaries if we're not careful. What are the factors that go into a work environment that prevent that from happening?
I'm staring at what is possibly the chillest person on earth, Nick Nisi. And I'm just like, Nick, do you ever get stressed, actually? So yes. I'm just waiting to hear Nick's response.
I'm like the Hulk in the first Avengers movie. I'm just always stressed.
You are
That's my secret.
You're just like you're like, in fact, I feel like Nick, your voice is a little ASMR for me because you're just so calm, you know? So I love it. You are the yin to my yang, like, you know. I'm like, and you're like, what up, people? You know?
I just have this handy mute switch ready, and I just scream into the void with that. No, I do feel like overly stressed a lot, and I think that is one thing that really leads to the blurring of boundaries. Like if I was gonna think about like when that happens regularly, it's when I don't feel like I was productive enough during the day, then I feel like I do have to come in and work after I get my kids to sleep or over the weekend and try and catch up a little bit. And I hate that feeling. And it's not usually like my fault. Like a lot of times it's just, I don't have the knowledge or the understanding that I need to do what I need to do. Like the requirements are poor or things like that. And I take it on me. Like I put that pressure on me as being like, well, I should know this, or I should know how to go and do this, even though I may not, have any insight into how to actually do that. And so I think that having that good support structure of like clearly defined tasks that are well groomed with all of the information that I need really helps me to stay on track, because the second that I'm waiting or looking around or asking somebody, then I've already got, another tab open with the news or Reddit or something going. And then it's just kind of like, well, I surfed Reddit all day. I guess I don't have anything to show for the day, so I better go make up some time later. And I really hate that.
So that actually, to me, is sounding like support staff and like well-defined roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like someone who has a well-defined kind of probably product management role that is responsible for lining things up, figuring out dependencies, making sure that the right information gets to the right people, separating out who's responsible for figuring out the problem and who's responsible for doing the work. I think that's one place where those are two very different types of work. And when you blur those lines and have the same people doing both things at least for the same projects, like I find myself, I do both of those types of work, but when I'm in an implementation, I usually try to stay only in implementation and be like, okay, for this project, y'all are figuring out what you want me to do, and I'm going to do it. And for this project, I'm going to figure out what we're going to do, but I'm not going to do it. You're going to do it, and kind of having those separated, at least for me, leads to a lot more or a lot less of that kind of weird blurred lines and that type of thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think a lot of what causes, I think a big point of anxiety in our industry is the fact that I think there's so much discovery, and discovery is often coupled with design and implementation, and like our discovery phase is like totally spread out. And I think for me, if you're looking at kind of work as a little bit of a pyramid structure where you have folk, maybe more junior folks on your team, and with a few kind of mid-level people, with then even fewer senior people, right? You really kind of want to try to make sure that like the decision making is clear as you kind of like, right, like if I have a junior engineer on my team, like the decisions for them need to be really clear and laid out. Like they should have less decision making while they're doing their work, right? Things need to be very clear. Whereas I think, for senior people that are a little bit maybe on the, kind of the bleeding edge of the the discovery train. I think maybe you're involved with making those decisions, or it's fine. You're more comfortable with uncertainty, right? But I think it's really important to know like where you fall on that line, because some people really need to have clear decisions and clear like instructions, and they're more kind of like executors. And some folks are more, creative, and they're like okay with like figuring it out on the go. But like both have their trade-offs, and figuring it out on the go is also extremely stressful and like highly overrated, I think. Like planning is something we are just universally not good at as an industry. And I think it's just because we're often moving so fast, and you have folks kind of also committing to deadlines without engineering input, and that's a huge cause of stress, so you have people trying to like, there's a lot of hero culture trying to rise to the like, the mythical deadline, that was set by someone that, wasn't you, so there's just so many causes for stress around planning, discovery, et cetera. And a lot of projects are like waterfall projects, in the sense that like there's a deadline, there's a set of things that they want, and like, go. But there hasn't been enough discovery and planning to actually account for that waterfall, because folks are maybe doing fake agile, so they're like doing this scrum fall thing, which is like the most painful thing in the world, because you're pretending to do agile and bite things off week by week, or by in a bi-weekly basis, but really like you have a hard deadline, and like you can't afford to like spread out your discovery like that. So it's just, yeah, like I feel like what we need as an industry is like some kind of a litmus test for like what type of culture is on your team, or what type of project is this, like where in the spectrum is this falling, is this Scrum, waterfall, like, and then like combat that with the team cultures, and you can kind of maybe come up with some type of a formula for like what's like the healthiest way to operate given certain inputs. But here I am trying to make a program out of this. But
no, I mean, I think that actually will lead well into a next segment. So let's take a short break, but then come back and start talking about, I think there's two aspects of what you mentioned here that would be really useful. One is, how do you know when you're looking at a work culture, maybe you're interviewing, what are some of the litmus tests or questions you can ask to identify what are you getting yourself into? And two is, if you are an individual in a culture that is not where you'd like it to be, where it's stressed, where all these things are there, what are some tactics that you can take to improve things, at least for yourself and ideally for the rest of your team? But first, let's take a short break.
Yay. Sorry, I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah.
Like, this is, what's it called? Recycled nostalgia. Is that the word? That, the sunscreen song, my favorite song. Have we talked about, I probably mentioned it on the show, but it's from like the late 90s. It's like some graduation song or whatever. And
yes,
like,
I know
yeah. And then it's like, there's that line about advice being like recycled nostalgia, and like, you should always take it or something like that. I don't know. But anyways.
That song is great. We should play it and get ourselves demonetized.
No, don't do it.
Does anyone need a bio break of any sort or anything?
We're good. We can keep rolling.
All right.
Should we plan, like, or I guess there's a lot to cover. I kind of coincidentally had this idea last night, and it had nothing to do with the fact that like I was going to be on the show, but I was like, wouldn't it be cool if there was like some metric for like team, like health, like in the sense that like there's some guide for healthy tech orgs, like there's some set of like standards, that like companies could like commit to, like we don't like, we don't set deadlines without employee input, or we don't, we force you to take your vacation. Like, we give you time to learn new skills because we understand that's part of your job, and you shouldn't have to maybe always do that in your own time. And like, wouldn't it be cool?
Let's get this content on record.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
Don't be
Cool.
over planning. Like, you got good stuff here. Let's get back
All right.
into it.
Cool.
All right.
Maybe that
So
could be
let's-
a third segment or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll throw
Or
stuff in.
whatever you want to do. I'll stop interrupting you now.
Well, during the break, Amel was sharing all of her great plans and ideas around what sounded almost like a industry code of conduct, or something that companies could say, like, here's the things we're going to do to make our work environments good for our engineers or our employees at large. Amel, do you want to repeat some of what you were saying there and maybe expand on it and let us know, like, what are you thinking? What is it that the ideal work environment would do that would make for a great place to work?
Yeah. So I had this midnight thought last night around, what it would take to like change the culture in tech, in the sense that, like, I actually, it's going to sound kind of morbid, and I apologize, especially for the newbies. Please do not let what I'm saying discourage you in any way. But I do think the culture in technology as a whole is a little toxic. And it's not necessarily just intentionally toxic, right? Like, in terms of like discrimination, et cetera. It's not the stuff that, you would think of typically. I find it toxic because I think we don't really acknowledge the skill building and the maintenance part of our job, right? In the sense that it takes a lot to become a software engineer, and it takes a lot to stay a good software engineer. And, there's culture around like what it takes to support a thriving career that I think, we don't acknowledge. And so wouldn't it be cool if we had like a set of standards or that companies could commit to show that they like abide by certain kind of cultural norms, right? So as in like 40-hour work week for real, we give you personal development time at work, and as well as a budget, because we acknowledge that you're always learning new skills, right? We don't set deadlines without your consent, yada, yada, yada. So all these things that are kind of like really common problems in our industry. What if we could just kind of like nip the butt, like nip those in the butt, right? Like including diversity standards, right? Like, wouldn't that be cool? And so, it would be nice to kind of just have some kind of like a little like certification seal of approval, like, stamp for like, hey, we're a healthy quote unquote company, like come join us, right? Because often it's really hard to know the company culture until you get there. And it's, you asking all the right questions in an interview sometimes doesn't even, get you that, and so having some kind of a transparent, like you said, code of conduct for your employees, for your tech employees, that have really hard, stressful jobs, like that would be cool, so.
I think your point about the amount of time that it takes to upskill and to then stay and maintain those skills is really important. There's this constant toxic discussion about, do you have to be passionate to be a developer and all of these things. But I think some of where that came from is an overlay to this, is related to that, is the sense that currently in our industry, you are generally not given time to keep your skills up to date or to develop them. And to be successful in this industry, you need to spend a lot of time developing your skills and keeping them up to date.
Exactly.
If you are quote unquote passionate, which I think is a terrible way to measure. And I saw a great article recently about like the dispassionate developer and things like that. But if you are quote unquote passionate, you are probably putting a lot of time into doing exactly those things, upping your skills, maintaining your skills, doing those sorts of things. You should not have to be passionate. You should be able to do this work for a paycheck because it's a well-paying job and will support you and your family and various other things. But you should also know going in that you are going to have to continually invest quite a bit of time on learning and maintaining your skills that will probably, unless you're very lucky, not be supported directly by your work folks. And so if you are not passionate about this, wanting to do it in your spare time, you need to account for that and figure out how are you going to do that work to keep yourself competitive and up to date.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Nick, I'd love to hear from you. I don't know if I was interrupting you or not, but the amount of time it takes to stay viable in this industry, and the fact that like we aren't acknowledging that companies don't actually build in time, it's kind of ridiculous. You kind of add that, like add the fact that companies don't ever have the same stack, right? Every company is a snowflake. So every new employee is walking in, not only having to learn the domain, but they're also having to learn the stack. And of course, it's never, ever like a standard implementation of XYZ, right? That's just software. Software has cruft and stories and skeletons and, oh, we're using TypeScript this way, actually, it's all of that is put on the employee's personal time. And I have to wonder, like, as an industry, I just think by adopting more standards and practices around like giving employees time to invest in themselves, et cetera, what we're doing is we're acknowledging that like the current pace is not sustainable. And in order for all of us to go faster and, and do it sustainably, like we have to slow down, right? So you have to slow down to go fast, and it's counterintuitive, but like by reinvesting in people, you're going to have happier employees who will likely stay there longer, et cetera, et cetera. As an industry, we all benefit, right? Like the collective industry benefits from this type of a change. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a big one, right? Because JavaScript is getting pretty complex these days. We're really
and apps are always complex.
Well,
right? Applications, as you say, like every application is its own special snowflake. There is almost no generic application out there. And I think, talking about standards, one I'd like to promote is it will take you 6 months to get up to speed and productive in a code base. That needs, I mean, we recently made that explicit inside of the startup I work at, Humu, where we say, as part of our onboarding documents, we expect you to be still getting up to speed for the next 6 months as you get on this. Because what we found is both individuals going through the process would get down on themselves. Why am I still feeling slow? Why am I unproductive? But then also their teammates need to know what to expect. This person isn't contributing as much, or they're asking a lot of questions. Yeah, they're 3 months in. We don't expect them to be fully productive for another 3 months.
Also expect other teammates to have to slow down, right? So, and budgeting for that and planning for that, right? Going back to the planning thing, where you're looking more holistically at like your inputs and outputs, keeping in mind that like we should dedicate part of everybody's time to go towards this new person, right? Like we should expect that. And engineers are also like, maybe like, I don't know what profession, there probably are professions that are more have more expensive onboarding, but it's a pretty expensive process to onboard an engineer. Because given the stat that K-Ball just shared, which I totally agree with, it takes long for people to become productive, and then it takes longer for them to become domain experts as well, which is this whole other thing that's very unique to your company. And so, yeah, retention is something that like we have an issue with in our industry. And I have to wonder like what it's like for people, because people do seem to change jobs every 2 to 3 years. And so every 2 to 3 years, you're learning a new stack and a new domain. You have to wonder like how many times can you do that throughout your career, right? Like, so I don't know. It's for me, like JavaScript is just becoming, what's the word? What's that word for like, is it brutalist? I don't know. So it feels very like daunting and like, no, do not enter. Like we're big and scary. Like the Wizard of Oz, the Wizard of Oz, like how it was, there's a word for it. I can't think of it. I feel like the level of complexity that we've added to JavaScript is just, or modern web application development, to be specific, like it's not friendly to newbies at all. It seems to only be getting more complex. Yeah, like it's just, we're not giving people the time to really skill up. Like, what are we doing? You know, like we're going to be left with nobody on the battlefield, right? except for the nerds that made this mess, you know? So
I think kind of going towards that, and something that Rebecca said in the chat is about hiring junior developers. I think that junior developers are a really good way to promote that culture of learning and keeping everyone humble, and possibly shaping the stack a little bit, because you don't want it to get overly complex and take, you know, longer than 6 months to get somebody onboarded into. And having continuous junior developers coming in, and the more senior folks teaching them, and, you know, really going through the pains of not being productive like individually, but, you know, pairing or just like, you know, giving them a I was going to say a lecture, but that can be boring too, but like a lecture on why things are the way they are within this project and how like it evolved to this. That's all really important, and really a really good way to keep that going.
So we've talked a lot about the problems. What are some tactics that individuals can take to address this now? And I'm interested at multiple levels. So if you're a existing senior-ish engineer, what are some things that you can do to help either yourself or your company improve? If you're a junior engineer coming in, like what are specific things that people can do to improve both personal situations and team situations?
you want to go first, Nick, or I've been yapping, so I'm going to mute myself.
Go ahead. I'm trying to think still.
No. I mean, I think if you're a senior developer, you really kind of, at this stage, you kind of want to start really thinking about what you want to kind of have as your niche, right? Like, you kind of want to start developing your T meaning like your T shape, you know, like what is your breadth of expertise and what's your depth of expertise, you know, and really kind of start making strategic decisions, because, you know, we all know life's like the shelf life of software. And so just, you know, you kind of really want to be strategic about like what you invest your time into. I can tell you, like, I'm not the first to jump on every single new thing anymore, right? I'm very picky about what I spend time learning and what I will invest in, because, you know, my time is really valuable. And you know, I've noticed with folks that are newer in the industry, they're just looking for something to latch onto, and they want to learn all the things, you know, like cloud, front end, this, that, you know, it's like awesome, you know? So like, but I think for me, it's at this stage, it's really about like developing your expertise in your niche, and like making sure that you have breadth, but really focusing on areas of depth in a strategic way that are going to help like amplify your career. And really looking for companies that you can grow that depth in, right? So making sure that the company that you're at is able to like support your plan for the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, you know, and making sure that you can grow with the company and you're not just coasting. Unfortunately, like, I think there's always going to be a level of uncomfortableness, right? With like, you know, if you're not uncomfortable as a software engineer writing modern code, like, yeah, you know, tell me your secret, you know? So, so yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah. I was going to say maybe for more senior folks on the team, maybe leading by example, in that you are an advocate for this type of learning. You're always pushing for having the budget to do more things. You're always trying to learn a different thing that may not really make sense for your tech stack, but it's going to help you in the long run, and helping others by helping others by being an advocate for them as well for getting things like that done.
I have a couple of tactics that I use that I recommend to folks, and I'm cognizant that some of them may work better for me because of various types of privilege. I'm an older white dude with a lot of experience, so like these may or may not apply in your situation. But one is being very deliberate about blocking out what time I'm available and what time I'm not available. So I work 5:30 to 2. Starting at 2 o'clock, I'm taking care of my kids. It is blocked on my calendar. I tell folks I may be available on Slack. If you Slack me, I might be able to respond. I'm not going to be able to do much because I'll be on my phone. And part of that, sometimes other things come up. This came up a lot in the pandemic. Working on a project, I'll let people know, like, I cannot work on this for the next 2 days. Then I will work on it. And being very, very aggressive and clear about communication there. And just saying when I'm available, being open about that, but also very, very clear about when I'm not. And I actually, going into the pandemic, I was not available a lot because we were still figuring out our childcare situation. And I was worried that folks would take this badly. Like, oh, he's like not available that much. He's not doing work. So I did all this, but what I actually got was a lot of people commenting either directly to me or indirectly to my manager or whatever about like how helpful it was to have that clarity and to have the communication. And so it may be, once again, that this is related to my situation and privilege, but I think it's something that is broadly visible, is we can be a lot clearer about our own lines so long as we are clear about communicating them to folks. I can do this. I can't do this. No, sorry, I can't take on any more today. That type of thing. The other tactic that I use that I definitely recommend to folks is I try to only commit up to about 90% of my capacity each week.
90 is a lot.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
I buffer inside of that too.
But I know what you mean.
If I'm going above 90, I reserve 10% specifically for learning and reading new things, 10% of my work time. And sense. Some of that is blocked on my calendar. Some of it I don't block on my calendar, but I just try not to commit as high. And this is something that I can't do all the time. I've been in a crunch project the last 2 weeks because we were just sort of short on some skill that I happened to have. And so I was providing it in multiple places, and it was a crunch time, and that could happen. But deliberately undercommitting as much as possible and reserving that time, not just to be makeup for where I messed up in my estimation, which that's another thing. Like that 90% is after I've padded my estimations and whatever. Like estimation is a skill that we could get into and go a long time on, right? Doing better estimates and estimates up front would improve a lot of people's work lives. But even after all of the estimate related padding, reserving time that is there for me to read and learn and try things.
That's awesome. Yeah. You've got you time at work.
Well, and
it's you're literally investing in yourself so you can invest in everybody else. So it's like literally going back to the company in an exponential way. So
exactly. Like it feels like, oh, I can't do this because I won't be productive. But if you do that for 6 months, at the end of that, you're already as productive as you would have been doing 100% of the time at the beginning. And then the next 6 months, you're going to be more productive. And the next 6 months, you're even more productive. It adds up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 120%. I mean, I guess if we're sharing specific tactics around happiness, I would say for me, I can tell you what I'm working on. It's definitely similar to Kevin. K-Ball. Like, does anybody call you Kevin actually?
Some people do.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can call me Kevin if you want to.
K-Ball's like, the government. The government calls me Kevin.
My wife.
Your wife. Okay. That's cute. It for me, it's like just, I would say learning to say no and remembering that like work is always going to be there. You have to manage yourself, right? Like no one is going to say, stop working. Like work is never going to say, don't do work. Work is like, living in capitalist societies, work is going to always be happy with overachievers and hard workers and all that jazz. We don't have a culture here of saying, like looking at employees overall betterment, right? So until we're there, you have to be looking out for yourself. And so be comfortable with no, don't overcommit. And just, yeah, like remember that work, like there's always tomorrow. And so it's okay to just walk away. And one thing I've started doing a while ago, and it's been working very well in order to help with walking away, is kind of developing a little bit of a rotunda. And when I say rotunda, it's like a, here's everything that's in my head before I leave for the day, write it all down, and then I can just like walk away. Because if I don't do that, you know, and I'm not as strict about it as I wish I was. When the days that I don't do that, you know, I'm constantly thinking about work because I don't want to forget that thing. So if you write it down, you're free of it, and in the morning you can come back and remember it, you know. And so just free yourself, like develop rituals for detaching from work, because that's the thing, like especially as knowledge workers, you know, my company gets so much more of my time than they even know, because, you know, in your subconscious, you're solving problems, and, you know, you're always like thinking about the problem. And so you have to consciously develop ways to like remove yourself, you know? So.
Yeah, there's something, it might be from book writing, maybe, like don't ever finish that paragraph for the day, like leave it halfway unfinished so that you can just pick it up easily and jump right in the next day. Like that's something that you can definitely do. And I try and do that with work, whether it's doing that where I know what I have to do to make this work, and I'll just leave it for tomorrow, because that way I have an easy win right when I start. Or it's what you do, Amel, and that's taking kind of rigorous notes about what I did, and like the thought tree that like came to the actual conclusion that I'm at, because oftentimes, you know, there's a lot of thinking that goes into a very little amount of code, and so it maybe looks like I spent all day writing 11 lines, but it took me a long time to figure out that those are the exact 11 lines that I want to write.
Oh yeah. Oh, writing code should always be the last part of your process too. Like think of, you know, design, you know, alignment, blah, 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 you know, then you write code. But yeah, totally agreed, Nick. And by the way, like, I guess the technique, and you know, this isn't obviously going to work for everybody. Everybody's different, but it's really just like, it's like a work journal, right? So it's like, what did you do today? And, you know, having a ritual at the end of the day, beginning of the day, and kind of like taking notes as you go along for like what you're doing or not doing. And I've noticed that when I shift my focus around like, what did I accomplish versus what did I do? Those are two different questions, you know? And I always have to check myself on like, what did I accomplish, right? Because sometimes you can do a lot and be super busy. And like, I'm very unhappy when I'm like constantly like pulled into different directions and I'm super fragmented, and it's busy work without really accomplishing anything. And that like,
you go to a lot of meetings too.
Oh yeah, no, exactly, right. And so I always have to check my accomplishments list, right? Because that also is another good way to make sure like you're moving in the direction that you need to be moving, and that's satisfying. And for me, like if I go extended periods without significant accomplishments, right, or enough accomplishments to feed my like base level of just kind of internal happiness, then I'm like, that's when I start to get miserable, you know? And so, you know, that's a good place to be.
I have a tactic that's almost the inverse of that, which is the priorities list. I start every day with a list of priorities between, I want to have at least one and less than 5. And if I don't have that at the beginning of my day, I write it. A lot of times I add it to my next day, or add it, you know, I know that day this is going to be important and I'll add it ahead of time. But those are my list, and try to get those done. If I get those done, I'm good. Other stuff's going to happen. I'm a manager some of the time, or like one of the things I do is manage. So I got a lot of meetings, but my priorities list, if I get those things done, I'm good.
I do that too. And I use the last 10 to 15 minutes of my day to make that. So I have like a cool down routine that's in my to-do list, and it just pops up at 4:30 or 4:45. These are like, it's like 10 steps, and they're really easy to go through, but it's like write notes about the next thing to do, push up any code that I have, clean up my work area, which I sometimes don't, and then write out what I'm going to start with the next morning.
All right. So there's a whole set of tactics that you can use to make work a little bit better for you. Let's take another quick break. And when we come back, let's talk about work environments we've worked in that have been either particularly good or particularly bad, and what made them so. Anybody need a bio break?
We're good. We can keep rolling. What was the intro? The prompt again? So
work experiences we have where the environment has been particularly good or particularly bad, and what made it that way.
Oh, particularly good.
Or particularly bad. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like I can't think, like, I mean, I feel like all the examples I've shared are like the ones, but that I can think of, to be honest, which is like diverse work environments with like lots of different people, like and then like places where people aren't on like like they aren't in each other's personal lives,
Sure. But so I guess my point, so those are all generalities that are true. Let's use this segment to tell stories.
Got it. Okay. Sounds good. Nick, you're going first.
I'm trying to think of a story now. I don't know. It's really hard.
Okay. Well, let's get back into it. And I'm going to put the pressure on you, Nick. Nick, can you tell a story from previous work experience that either was something that was really good for your kind of sentiment at work, how you were feeling, or really bad?
Well, I'm struggling a little bit to think about that because I've worked from home for the last 10 years and I kind of, it all depends on me, really. No, not necessarily.
All right, I'll go first.
Okay.
I'll put the,
please.
I was in a work environment one time where it was at a startup. This was quite a while ago. And the CEO would yell at his EA behind closed doors, but he would yell at her and could not seem to understand at the time. I think he did eventually, and credit to him, he grew a lot, but he could not understand why that would upset the rest of the company and kill everyone's productivity for the day. And I think one of the things that or sort of the lesson I would take from this to generalize is that people are leaky. We're all embedded in these social networks at work. If one person is really unhappy or one person is getting treated very unfairly, that ripples out to all sorts of folks. And I think, having in mind that if some people are unhappy, it's actually probably or are bad apples and treat people poorly or whatever, it's actually probably better, even if they're really important in one dimension, for them to leave the company. I think I have coworkers that I love working with, or have had coworkers that I've loved working with, where I could tell they're getting unhappy and they're just not a good fit. And I say, you know what? Like, I really like working with you. I'd like to keep working with you. You're unhappy. You should probably find a new job. Like, we can maybe fix this. Let's talk about it. But if we try for 2 months and we're not fixing it, like, let's find you a better place to work that's going to fit you better. Because when one person's unhappy, it radiates.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's also just not only one person that's unhappy. It's sometimes when you have someone that's just dragging the team down, that's another situation where, if you put someone who's maybe, I hate using the word performer, but I apologize, I'm going to use it. Like high performers, low performers, you put somebody that's quote unquote a low performer with, this high functioning team or whatever, you think like, oh, the high functioning team will affect, this person and help them out. But it's like the opposite, like that one person can like throw the monkey wrench into the whole situation. So yeah, you gotta, like the princess and the pea thing, right? You gotta find that P and take it out. Yeah, I feel like for me, specific examples, I think there's, oh gosh, like, you know, I can't even think of like one specific example that I could share that wouldn't like be damning or whatever. So let's see. I'll share maybe some good examples, some good culture norms I got to experience as, you know, folks being remote and on Slack. You know, there's kind of a lot of intention around like when you ping people, and like keeping in mind, like this is specifically for like a globally distributed team that I was on, you know, folks would intentionally like not mention their name, you know, in Slack, even without the @ sign, they would like put like the name, and they put like slashes in between their name so that like the Slack mentions wouldn't pick them up. And, you know, so there's really like thoughtful considerations around like, hey, this person is, you know, isn't working right now and we're a globally distributed team. And so how do we, you know, respect their time zone and their boundaries? And in general, I would say like lots of other good examples are for me around like remote working culture gone right, you know. I think that's the true liberation for our people. When I say our people, I mean tech people. Like if we could just, every company could adopt like good remote first cultural standards, regardless of whether they're remote or not. Like it just would help across the board with like transparency and transparency, communication, you know, people not having anxiety, people being able to do their best work, respecting different communication styles. And so I would say more of that, you know, more examples like that would be really nice.
Mm-hmm. To what you said about Slack, every time somebody uses something that's not my name, like with, you know, N-ICK or something like that, I always add that to the list of highlighted words. I go the opposite way with that.
Oh, that's so funny. OMG.
At my current work, we actually had a push because folks were struggling with disconnecting to the pandemic. And they were saying like, you have to, not have to, but like strongly recommended, take Slack off your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know, just have it on your work computer. Don't have it on your phone. And I actually really appreciated this as something that the company was pushing and saying like, hey, you are putting this on here. We're saying don't, because it's stressing you out. And that's our problem as a company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If something's really an emergency, they know how to reach you, right? Sort of, or they should know how to reach you.
We have an on-call system. If you're on call, you can get paged on call. I got paged by an accidental on call at the beginning of this thing. And I slacked in and said, what's the deal? Can somebody else take it? They did. It was fine. But like there's an on-call system. That's what should be reliable for off hours, not Slack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to set up your Slack to have I forgot what they call it in the UI specifically, but they have like off hours where even if somebody mentions you, it's not going to actually give you an alert I have it between like 6 and 7 a.m. or something like that.
Nick is like, I have it between 6 and 6:30. It's only 30 minutes in a day where you can't reach me, everybody.
No, it's a little more than that. I think it's like 5 to 7 or something like that. But
5 p.m. to 7 a.m., right? Not...
yes, right. 1700 to 700. 0700. Yeah. But it also like gives you right there in the UI, like especially if you're, or maybe it's only if you're DMing someone, but if you're DMing someone who has that set up, it will say that they're not going to get this message, and it gives you an extra little link that you can click that will actually send it through. And so it like lets you kind of continue on and carry on and mention them without it actually popping up on their phone. And if they manually go in and check Slack, it's there and they can see it, but it's not something that is going to disrupt them if they're not actually looking at it. So I definitely set that up, and I kind of take the liberty of assuming that other people have too. And so I will continue, not that I like ever message after hours, but like if I do, I'll have it set up and just assume that they're ignoring their phone because it's not actually going through to them. Maybe that's a bad assumption.
Yeah. Well, wouldn't it be nice if your company had a standard around that though, where everybody had to set that up, you
Yeah.
know? That would be nice. So that,
Yeah.
I think that is overwhelmingly one of the messages we have here is like, we're all trying to do individual solutions, but this is a systemic issue. And the company needs to set standards and have things, because otherwise you're always wondering like, oh, well, if I'm not on, does that mean people are like disappointed in me? Am I letting my teammates down? Like if I'm taking all this time for childcare, are they going to be mad at me? All these different pieces. Whereas like if we address it at a systemic level, it's a lot cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, really, like for me, the root cause of a lot of this also just comes from a synchronous culture, right? Like if you have a culture where decisions need to be made synchronously all the time, people need to have a meeting to make decisions, and they have to have a meeting about the meeting, and which is super common, right? But like ultimately, like if we could all start developing better habits around asynchronous communication, having long form discussions on, forums or like GitHub, for example, right? Or, where you have a history and a log of the decisions, you can refer to it over time. It's there as a resource that's greppable for new employees, right? You're able to kind of take the anxiety factor out because, people don't have to respond 30 seconds after they're pinged on Slack, right? I think that's another unfortunate like expectation that we have now, where people are just glued to their computers and devices. If someone's not responding, like where are they? What, blah blah blah. Like, it's async. Like we should really make it async. Unless it's marked urgent. Like I'm going to respond when I can. You're in the queue. Like, but you're not in the urgent queue. So unless you put yourself in the urgent queue, right? But don't abuse the urgent queue, right? So
do you think that's?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you think that that's gotten better or worse in the pandemic and the rush to remote work?
I think it's worse because I think you now have like literally hundreds of Slack channels or dozens of Slack channels that you're monitoring across the there's a lot of chatter for companies that are new to being remote, right? Like people like there's FOMO, like but the reality is like even if you're in the office, like are you literally going to every single meeting? Are you part of every single team's discussions? Are you like you can't be all in one place. So in a sense, actually having being physical somewhere limits you, right? Like your humanity is a limiting factor. But the like Slack, it just gives you this window into everybody and everything, and so for the information lovers anonymous, aka most software engineers, right, like feeling the need to like read every thread or respond to everything, or it's anxiety inducing, and it's I think become, I mean, I see it all the time. Like people are constantly they're eager to jump on things and be helpful, but really like they should just all be stepping back from Slack and like chilling out, like we don't need to like be, I don't know, so connected, right? Like
I listened to a podcast recently about this. It was Ezra Klein interviewing Cal Newport, who's the author of like Deep Work. And his new thing is a book he calls The Hyperactive Hive Mind, describing exactly this phenomenon of like, we've started organizing work in a way where we're all doing this real-time pinging backwards, back and forth. And it is, there
not
are
productive at all.
Various systemic reasons that push us there, but it makes us less productive and less happy. And figuring out how we can better organize our work so that we are doing more of it in batched manners and in asynchronous manners. Because I think there is value in synchronicity for some types of work, right? One of the reasons we fall into this is collaboration, rapid iteration, do this, feedback, go back and forth. Like there is value in that for classes of work. But when all work is done that way, it's miserable. And so thinking about how we organize ourselves so that we batch together our synchronous work and do it effectively, and we're doing it at roughly the same times or roughly the same time windows. And then we have long times of periods for deeper work, for focused work, for stuff that is not getting interrupted all the time, I think is super valuable.
I can't believe we haven't talked about deep work and focus. I mean, it's this could be like a series. This could be its own podcast. We could like literally every week we could pick a topic and just go deep because no pun intended. But that's such a
Thomas
huge.
in the
That's
chat highlights.
such-
I got the
yeah.
book name wrong.
I was gonna say,
It's-
can you pull up? Can we put the book in the show notes? What's the
Definitely.
book called?
Book is
A
called
World
Without Email.
Oh my God, yeah. That'd be
And
great.
the podcast was great. He over pushes a little bit. I think he is more hesitant to acknowledge some of the value points of this mode of working, but a lot of his points are just so spot on.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never heard that term like hive thinking. I mean, that sounds so appropriate from like what I've been seeing with like remote teams. It's a little much. Yeah. So
Yeah. At the same time, I'm kind of like the pandemic, when the pandemic first started over a year ago now, it was really hard. Like I was in the same situation as K-Ball with figuring out childcare and all of that. It was really hard to try and figure out how to work productively. And it's gotten much better now. But one thing that I am going to be thankful for, I think, post-pandemic, if that's such a thing, is that everyone at my company, where 90% of the people go to the same building every day, and I am not going to be one of those people, I am thankful that maybe they won't forget about me and the 3 or 4 other people who are remote, because they have lived that for a year, and they know that
don't you forget about me. Are we gonna maybe like? Do we have to do copyrights for this too? If I sing it, don't. Just kidding. I won't. I'll stop now. It's less than 25 seconds.
I don't know how many episodes we have in a row now of someone singing, but we should keep this streak rolling.
It's okay.
release a soundtrack.
Yeah. It was so. I felt that the need for me to sing was so strong that I had to interrupt Nick. I was like, nope.
I think you're spot on. I think moving to a world where remote is a more part of the thinking is going to be helpful for everyone who works remote. And we're moving back to a world where we can actually be in person some of the time is going to help all of our mental health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been wonderfully therapeutic, hopefully helpful. Do either of you have, actually, no, let me put you on the spot. Each of you, one final parting thought, something that you would put out there to the universe for people to think about, try, or do with related to making work environments better. I'll go first. Shameless plug. I work at a company focused on this. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited about it. Check out my company, Humu, both as a potential place to work because we are hiring engineers, or as a place to help your place of work get better. There's so much involved in this, and there's so many different systemic aspects that it really helps to be thinking about it systemically and not just trying to do it as an individual.
Totes. Mine is be kind to yourself. Like, cut yourself some slack. It's been a really difficult, not just year, I think several years, so just take it easy, yo. And this is a really hard industry to be a part of and stay a part of. And so just acknowledge that you are doing your best, and your best is good enough, actually. Yeah, that's it.
All right, I'll build on top of that and say acknowledge that your coworkers are doing their best too.
Yeah.
Like just sitting in silence or reading things on Slack. I read everything with a very snarky tone, so I assume that everybody's mad at me, or it can feel isolating, not getting any feedback ever. So go out of your way to give feedback.
Can I give you some feedback right now?
Oh no.
No, you're awesome, Nick. That's my feedback to you. Put
Thank
that
you.
in a wild loop, It's just going to infinitely run. So that's forever feedback from me. So
Thanks, Amel, and likewise.
you're welcome.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. I appreciate both of you as feedback. And this has been another fun episode, JS Party. Check us live Thursdays, 10 o'clock Pacific, 12 Central, I think is what folks say, since Y'all, so many of you are based Central. 1 o'clock Eastern. We record live. You can join us live streaming on YouTube. Woohoo! But we'll catch you next week.
Yay.
Oh my God, Jared,
So funny.
thank you.
Yeah, that was super fun, y'all. I just realized anybody listening to this would be like, oh my God, Amel is like, I said like so many things to Nick that were very like complimentary. I just realized like Amel is like Nick's fangirl, and you know, I just realized
It's
that,
the
so.
T-shirt.
It was
He just
very
has you.
uncomfortable, to be honest.
I'm sorry.
No.
No, I know you're kidding, but no, I was like, you do have a very soothing voice, Nick. It's true.
Thank you.
I would tend to agree with that.
Please sing us "Careless Whisper."
Careless
I'm a terrible singer.
Yeah, but you're a karaoke guy, aren't you?
Yeah, I love it. I just love making an ass of myself.
That's what I just asked you to do.
Yeah, K-Paul, thank you so much. Thank you so much for moderating. This was really nice. It was a really good topic. So,
I'm glad you liked.
yeah, it was really good. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't come up with like specific stories because I don't want to like. It's like
No, I know.
it's
I know.
very like, you know.
You don't want to throw people under the bus. I get it.
Yeah, and then I'm too mentally like preoccupied to even think of like good examples. So like, you know, the only things that could come to mind easily are the things that I could grab easily. So
Well, while we're handing out compliments, shout out to the chat room, which was
yeah,
hella
they were-
active today.
yeah,
Everybody
usually,
was throwing in good stuff.
but no caps. Where did the caps go?
Well, that was just too much to ask, maybe.
Just kidding. Yeah, no, I know. No, they were awesome. So many links and lots of nodding from them. So
I remapped caps lock as control, so I can't even caps lock if I wanted to. Or do you just hold shift the entire time?
no, I just put caps lock on.
You caps lock.
And then
Yeah.
I
type,
also
yeah.
remapped caps lock as control.
I can't
too.
caps lock. I don't even know how.
Yeah.
But I can shift type for a little while, but I just can't sustain it, you know? I'm not that good. I'm not that mad or excited.
Oh, that's so
We
funny.
have
All right,
a-
cool. So we should stop our recordings,
Yeah,
right?
say
Yeah,
goodbye, live listeners. Thanks for hanging out. We'll be
What-
back next Thursday.
What episode number was this?
1.